Hi, and welcome to this episode of Your Future, Your Finances. I'm your host, Brian Kuhn. Here we interview a variety of experts on the topics of personal finance, personal growth, and current events here in Maryland, D.C., and nationally. In this first segment today, we're discussing a timely topic with the baby boomer generation retiring, and that is Medicare and its accompanying programs. To help us sort that out, we are speaking with Mrs. Tracy Russo of HTA Financial. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So when we talk about Medicare, there seems to be an alphabet soup of different programs. Can you elaborate on them?
Yes, so what we find when we work with our clients is that many of them get really nervous as they approach age 65 in retirement because they're going from one form, a centralized healthcare, meaning one product that services all of their different healthcare needs, into more of a multi-product and multi-part segment. And Medicare really has four main parts. It has A, B, C, and D. So Medicare A and B is through the federal government. A is your hospitalization coverage and B is your medical coverage. So if you think of Medicare Part A as inpatient being admitted into the hospital and Medicare Part B as your outpatient, so everything else like doctors, specialists, labs, x-rays, MRIs, surgeries, chemotherapy, even things that you go to the hospital for but you're not admitted for, like emergency room treatment or if you're there under observation, all of that falls under Medicare B. So you have your two programs through the federal government, A and B, and then you're going to add your secondary insurance, your C and D. So when everything's all said and done, you're going to have four parts, A, B, C, and D.
Can you tell us what someone would expect to pay for Medicare and its programs?
Sure. So the Medicare A and B through the federal government is an income-based program. So there's a sliding rate depending on what your income is. And there's 6 tiers of different income brackets, with the base tier being individuals earning less than $85,000 or households earning less than $170,000. And those individuals are going to pay $135.50 per month for their Medicare Part B in 2019. Now, they wouldn't pay that if they were low income and Medicaid or state financial assistance approved. Then the state will help pay that premium for them. But most individuals are going to pay in that category. And then just to give you an idea what the sliding scale is, the 6th and highest income bracket are for individuals earning earning more than $500,000 or households earning more than $750,000. They will pay in excess of $430 a month for their Medicare Part B. But as I mentioned initially, there are 4 parts and pieces, so that's not the only part of the premium. So the Medicare Part A costs $0 for most individuals because they pay their Medicare taxes, and that's what Medicare taxes pay for. The B, probably about $135 for many people. The C part, the secondary, the Medicare Supplement or the Medicare Advantage, that's going to range in price. Some are as low as like HMOs are as low as $0 in many cases, but it could go in north of $300 a month depending on the coverage. And then the D part, the drug part for Medicare, that typically falls in about the $35 ballpark. So just to kind of wrap all of that together for you, if we were in the base income bracket and we wanted comprehensive coverage with very little out-of-pocket medical expenses in Medicare, we could probably expect somewhere in the ballpark of about $300 a month.
Okay.
All in, A, B, C, D, whereas those highest income earners can expect more like $700 a month for Medicare.
Yeah. Are there things that Medicare doesn't cover?
There are. So some of them are pretty self-explanatory, like cosmetic surgery and holistic type treatments. They aren't yet covered by Medicare. But the ones that tend to be a shock to many of our clients are things like dental, vision, and hearing. Now, there is other insurance that covers dental, vision, and hearing, but Medicare's not it. If it's major medical related, like, let me give you an example, like eye issues, cataracts, glaucoma, diabetic eye issues, those are covered as major medical, but routine eyeglass exams, dentures, bridges, crowns, or any kind of hearing aids typically are not covered by Medicare.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the differences with the Part C and D, what they do?
Sure. So Medicare Part C is the secondary insurance for Medicare A and B. It helps pick up a lot of the holes of the major medical, and that really comes in 2 flavors. Medicare Part C is Medicare Advantage, but you have the option to choose a Medicare supplement as well. And so there's two main differences between Advantage and Supplement. The first difference, it revolves around the access to care that you need. So Medicare Advantage plans are managed care plans, meaning you, your doctor, and the insurance company are all involved in those medical decisions and what needs to be done. And because they're managed care, they're network-based plans, so they're PPOs and HMOs. The doctors have to agree to participate with those plans under the terms and conditions. Now, on the flip side of that, I had said they could do Medicare Supplement also. Medicare Supplement is not managed care, meaning you and your doctor are responsible for the medical decisions and deciding what care is needed. And because of that, there are no networks. As long as the doctor accepts Medicare through the federal government, which many do, they will accept any Medicare supplement insurance out there. Now, there is one other difference, and that's the cost. So with Medicare Advantage plans, they tend to be lower on the premium. In fact, some HMOs only cost $0, $40, $60 a month, but higher on the out-of-pocket expenses. You're going to pay a copay every time you go and receive medical care. And if you need a lot of medical care, those copays can run up to about $6,700 per year before you reach your maximum.
Yeah.
On the Medicare supplement side, it's the flip of that. It's higher cost coverage, but lower out-of-pocket expenses. So a typical premium for somebody who's getting ready to retire, maybe under 70 years old, is going to be about $120 to $170 a month for that. And that is going to cover you very comprehensively, meaning you may have little to nothing out of pocket. Believe it or not, you can go to the doctor and pay nothing for your medical services under many Medicare supplement plans. And then just to finalize that, the D portion, the drug portion, you know, there's a variety of coverages there, but they all kind of follow that same format in the coverage. So really, when you're shopping for D plans, you want to look at your specific prescriptions to determine what is the right plan for you. And some drug plans come included with your health insurance, like the Medicare Advantages include the drug plans, versus the Medicare supplement, you would buy a drug plan separately.
Seems like a household would be making quite a few decisions as they go through this.
There really is.
Yeah, so if they make one and they want to change, can they do that?
Yes, they can. So the Medicare A and B, you're going to put that in place when you first turn 65 or retire. But the C and the D portion, people do shop that coverage on a fairly regular basis. One of the biggest questions we get, especially for those healthy individuals that come in at 65, 68 years old, and they say, I'm not getting a whole lot of medical care. Why don't I go with the lower premiums right now? I don't mind the higher out-of-pocket expenses. I don't mind the networks or the managed care because I'm not really getting medical care. But then when I get sick, can I transition over to the more comprehensive plan for the higher cost? And that might be a little bit more difficult because those lower cost plans, we get once a year, that annual enrollment period. Many people see the commercials come out in the fall saying it's now time to shop your coverage. That's for the Medicare Advantage plans. So you can get into one of those plans, the lower cost plans, any year without medical questions. But the higher cost, more comprehensive plans, if you want to get into one of those after you were originally qualified for Medicare, you would have to answer medical questions. So it's easy to go from the comprehensive to the higher out-of-pocket cost, but if you get sick, it's a little bit harder to go from the higher out-of-pocket cost to the more comprehensive. You may be paying more for the plans at that time, depending on your medical situation.
Interesting. So your HTA Financial, you in essence act as a consultant on all of this. Do you charge a fee? How does that work?
We don't charge a fee. What we found was that there was a big gaping hole in the knowledge and education based for Medicare. So there's lots of people out there that you could call them and say, I want to buy a Medicare Advantage, a Medicare supplement, a prescription drug plan. What can you sell me? But there weren't as many qualified resources to provide that overall education based. When should I go into Medicare? What does it look like? What are all the parts and pieces? How do they differ? How do I make that choice? And so we really wanted to bring that education to all individuals completely free of service. Now, The elephant in the room is how on earth do you stay in business and make money?
Sure.
And so all that we ask is if you found our educational services valuable and you enjoyed working with us, when it does come time for you to enroll, because at some point everybody enrolls in Medicare. When it does come time for you to enroll, give us a call, because when you enroll in those C and D type programs, the supplements, the Advantage, and the drug plans, the insurance companies pay us an enrollment fee to do that paperwork. It doesn't cost you any more money on the insurance, but they do pay us to handle that enrollment for them. So that in turn,
Wonderful.
it all kind of works out.
Sure, wonderful.
Yeah.
So how can folks find you online?
We are available at www.htafinancial.com, and we have some resources on there for education and also, of course, how to get in touch with our consultants. We have live consultants that are all salary based. They're not commission based or sales bonused. So they are really there to listen and help.
Wonderful. Well, appreciate you coming on the show, sharing some information.
Great. Thanks so much for having me today.
Sure. That does it for this segment. We'll be right back with another guest. You're watching Your Future, Your Finances. I'm your host, Brian Kuhn.
You're still watching? Okay, good. Because I'm about to tell you why the message you see on the screen might someday become a reality unless we do something to prevent it. First, let's talk about net neutrality. What is it? Net neutrality is the principle that internet service providers, companies like Comcast, Verizon, and T-Mobile, can't favor or block certain websites regardless of the source. This means that when you access the internet, you have access to the whole internet in all its weird and wonderful glory, from giants like Google to that new business's very first website. Right now, we do have a free and open internet, but that might change. Legislation is currently being introduced that will allow larger companies to pay ISPs to receive preferential treatment. The newly appointed FCC chairman, Ajit Pai, this guy right here, has been quoted as saying he wanted to take a weed whacker to current FCC rules and that net neutrality's, quote, days are numbered. That sounds pretty concerning if you ask me. So why should you care? Well, firstly, net neutrality makes it possible for small business owners and entrepreneurs to launch their business online, create effective advertising, and reach customers. Without net neutrality, the next Amazon or Netflix might never see the light of day. Secondly, the open internet allows minority communities to have a voice, to share their stories, and connect with like-minded individuals. Current net neutrality rules allow people of color and members of the LGBT community to speak freely online without fear of gatekeeping or misrepresentation. So you might be thinking, what happens next? Maybe you don't think net neutrality is all that important. Maybe you'd like some more information. If that's the case, I encourage you to do some research of your own. I hear the internet is a great place to start.
Hi, and welcome back. You're watching Your Future, Your Finances. In this next segment, we are discussing a very important topic for anyone who has ever interacted with a trust or has ever acted as what's called a trustee. To learn more about that and how it works, we welcome to the show Miss Verena Miser, partner at Lewicki, O'Connor, Hunt, and Miser. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So as I understand it, a lot of times for trustees, there are friends or relatives named. Why is that done, and is that a good choice?
About 90% of my clients like to name a friend or relative as trustee as opposed to a corporate trustee. And I think that when faced with the question as to who should manage and distribute their property, which they have managed and distributed all of their lives, it's natural to expect that a competent friend or relative can step into their shoes. And cost is also a big factor. People just expect that an individual will charge less in the long run. And sometimes clients even think that trustees would be willing to serve for no compensation. And when I hear that, I'm usually a little bit concerned, and I make sure that they understand the extent of the responsibilities of a trustee. Because by naming somebody that we trust and whose skills we think highly of as trustee, we're turning them into a fiduciary. And by making them responsible over our property in the trust, that imposes a lot of legal obligations on them. So serving as trustee is a serious job, and it takes time and effort.
So what is the first step someone should take when they are asked to be a trustee?
First thing I would do is get a hold of the trust agreement. And that could either be a standalone document if somebody set up a trust during their lifetime, or it could be somebody's will if the trust was set up under their will after they've passed away. Then I would find out if the trust already has any property in it. So if the trust already existed, then you should turn to the person who was your predecessor, the original trustee, and get their records and hope that they kept good records. If it's a new trust, then find out where the property is coming from and what you should be ready for. I would also suggest that you fully understand the trust agreement and maybe sit down with an estate planning attorney, because modern trust agreements are very complex and they give trustees a lot of tools for managing the trust. So it's in your favor to really understand what you have to work with. I would also go into the document and look for the distribution instructions, just so that you understand whether you have discretion or whether you have to make distributions according to a certain standard, which requires you to distribute for certain purposes. And I would then ask yourself how familiar you're with accounting principles, because generally it is important to track income generated in the trust and also income coming from external sources like retirement accounts. And you should also be able to capture the flow of income distributions to beneficiaries. You might want to consider hiring a financial advisor or an investment manager, depending on what you have to work with. And if you're not familiar with the concepts of duty of care and duty of loyalty, the typical fiduciary duties, I would suggest you take a crash course, because you don't want to make a mistake. It could cost you the trusteeship. You might be removed, and also you might be held liable for mismanagement if there are any losses.
Sounds like a hard job. So you mentioned property, though. Let's say there's property in the trust. How do you find that out and determine what the trust owns?
Right. So you recognize property that is held in the trust by how it's titled. So for financial accounts, you just look at whether it's titled in the name of a trust or the trustee of a trust. It really should be titled in the name of the trustee of a trust, but either one would indicate to you. If it's real property, look at the deed, because at some point somebody would have had to add the property to the trust. So there should be a deed in the land records that names the trustee of the trust as the owner. So one of your primary responsibilities as trustee is to inventory and control the property. So I would account for the assets and find out what you have to work with. Is it cash? Is it business interests? Is it promissory notes? It could be anything. And that's where serving as trustee can become fun and maybe interesting, because you might have to deal with property that you haven't been familiar with before. What if you suddenly have to deal with antique cars or artwork, or you might suddenly have to learn about property types that you just never had to deal with. So then also make sure you have access to all the property, know where it is, because you're responsible for it. And you also need to know when to make certain payments for property if that's necessary. So good spreadsheets and calendaring tools will become your best friends. Look if you find that any property should be insured or maybe moved to safe storage. Find out how property is used and if there's any use agreements that might have to be updated, and because you as a trustee can decide whether to do something like that. I mean, you're now in charge of the trust and responsible for it. And let's see, yeah.
So once you have control, then what's next of the assets in the trust?
Right, so the beneficiaries. So, and that is really important. So it's important to communicate often and effectively, to be consistent, and to document all your communications with the beneficiaries. And be particularly careful with beneficiaries that may be fragile, vulnerable, maybe disabled or young, or beneficiaries who trust you a lot. And make it very clear to them that your role as trustee is not as an advisor to them. You have your own legal responsibilities. In fact, you might want to hire an attorney to support you. So that is very important that they understand that.
Then from a trust, generally they're what are called distributions. So do you have advice for a trustee when they're making those?
As far as making distributions to a beneficiary, it's important to be well informed about the beneficiary and to verify everything. So if they tell you they're in school or they have a job, you may want to verify that. Also be aware of their health, their family situation. If the distribution requires you to be aware of their other financial situation, because you're only supposed to maybe distribute to them if they really need it, then you will need the beneficiary to provide financial statements to you, so they need to cooperate with you. And I suggest to consider having trustee beneficiary type meetings, almost like a board meeting, where you set up an agenda and you document all your decisions and the factors that they're based on, and keep minutes, all of that, because the better you can record everything and paper your file, you can support your actions.
Now in trust there's a term sometimes called discretion. So what does discretion mean as it relates to the trustee?
Well, my main recommendation there is really quite short, and it is exercise discretion consistently. It leads to a smoother relationship with the beneficiary. And it really means that you can decide whether or not and when to make a decision and how much to distribute. You have a complete control. The trust does not instruct you to distribute a certain amount at a certain time. It is completely up to you. And that also means that the beneficiary cannot force you to make a distribution.
Let's say a beneficiary isn't in agreement. There's a dispute with the beneficiary. What happens then?
Well, there are different ways to handle that. If the trust was drafted with a trust protector provision, you could rely on that and invoke the trust protector. Trust protectors can have a variety of powers, including the power to mediate a dispute. So I would suggest that.
How about if the beneficiary does something that that doesn't work with the trustee? Like what actions could a beneficiary take to make it harder?
For example, if the beneficiary moves out of state, it might suddenly be hard for the trustee to be informed about the beneficiary's situation. That is a particular concern in the context of special needs trusts, because the laws, the government benefits vary from state to state. So a beneficiary who suddenly moves to another state may have to start from scratch.
Now that we have a good sense of the responsibilities that come with serving as a trustee, how about back to the beginning of the program where we talked about family member as a good choice? Would you?
Right. So I think first thing is you can do every trustee a favor by delivering a well-drafted trust agreement with a lot of tools for them, very clear instructions, and as you choose a family member or friend, understand the fiduciary duties that they have to live up to, and find somebody who has the time and the ability to implement that and not to fail. You don't want to set anybody up for failure. And just, I suggest to have a family meeting at the end of the estate planning process. So I generally bring in the adult children of my clients or their families or siblings and go over their responsibilities so that at least they've heard it once. And then my clients can also assess whether their children are up to it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, thanks for appearing on the show and the helpful information.
You're welcome.
And congrats on your partner.
Thank you very much.
How can folks find you online?
So our website will be up shortly, and it is www.lohmlaw.com. It's Loam Law, so it's for our initials, Luiki, O'Connor, Hunt, and Miser. And our phone number is 410-489-1996.
New firm established after many years working
Yes.
in the industry.
Yes, it's
Congrats
very
on that.
exciting. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We have run out of time for this segment. We thank you for watching Your Future, Your Finances, and hope you have some takeaways. I'm your host, Brian Kuhn, and if you have any questions for the show or one of the guests, you may contact me at bkuhn@psgclarity.com. Lastly, as always, a thank you to Laurel TV for their production and airing of this segment. You can watch the show every Sunday at 10 a.m. on Laurel TV, Comcast Channel 71, 996 for HD, and Verizon Channel 12, or the live stream at laureltv.org. If you're watching this on YouTube, please also feel free to like and comment and follow the Laurel TV channel. See you next time.